We're here with Mike Romano of the NTCA. Mike, you just spoke of something that's on, I think, the minds of a lot of folks out there, and that's broadband, the reform and the National Broadband Plan. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where we stand today?
Yeah, so thanks. The FCC started this process, obviously, with the National Broadband Plan in March of 2010, and that kicked off a whole host of proceedings, and now we're to the point where they've gotten to the one that addresses universal service and inter-carrier compensation reform. And the Broadband Plan was this expansive, visionary sort of document that laid out a lot of endgame milestones or sort of goalposts, but didn't have all the milestones to get us from here to there. And so where they are now, and I think what's a good step forward, is they've taken this notice of proposed rulemaking that came out last month. And it's a step forward in the sense that while it's not perfect in terms of the actual proposals that are in there, conceptually it's much more surgical and precise in terms of a near-term and a longer-term focus on reform, and lays out some more specifics in terms of how we're going to reform universal service and inter-carrier compensation to orient them for a broadband environment. So more work to do, but I think it's a recognition of the fact that serving rural areas is very different. It's hard to do, and that there's a special care needs to be taken to make sure you're not disrupting operations in those areas.
Well, and one of the things that you emphasized in your talk is how the associations are working together to address the plan and also address it in the language they use as well.
Yeah, so that's been, I think, a great development the last year or so, 9 months, is we've tried to speak with one rural voice in D.C. Not always easy, candidly, but I think we've got a great working relationship. NTCA, OPASCO, WTA, NECA, the Rural Alliance are all working together to try to come up with reform solutions that are credible and workable. I mean, we've moved beyond just saying no as some of the early responses were to the National Broadband Plan, and we've gotten now into here's a solution that we think fits both what the FCC needs to achieve as a broader public policy objective, as well as getting into the details that will make a reform solution workable for NTCA and other association members.
Well, and so one of the things that is part of that is I think the advantage that the rural carriers have is the fact that they are in those markets. The people who wrote the plan, as we heard earlier today, aren't necessarily from those areas. But one of the things you emphasized was the importance of getting in front of the FCC.
Yeah, so the FCC has emphasized that it's going to be a data-driven process. And while at the national level or even at the state association level, obviously people have we as representatives have insight into some of the aggregated data, either on a national or state level. The message we're getting from the FCC clearly is that they want to understand impacts at a more granular level, individual companies. And so one of the things we're starting to emphasize to folks is if they can come into the FCC and tell their stories, and not just here's here's who I am, here's when we were founded, here's where we serve, but really talk about the proposals you've put forth in the notice of proposed rulemaking would have an impact of this on my company, this specific impact at least, and that would affect my workforce in this way, that would affect my customers in this way, that would affect my ability to offer service throughout this 20,000 square mile area or whatever it is. Telling those and bolting them to facts on the ground really, I think, can make a difference in moving us from where we are right now in the notice of proposed rulemaking to being yet still more surgical in terms of the reform solutions the FCC comes out with.
So, and clearly, you want the data with it too, but it also would things like, video interviews with local businesses and with the educators and so forth. Would that help as far as when they do the presentation to have a 2-minute summary type of thing?
Sure, absolutely. Having context for what broadband means to a community is also very important. In fact, at NTCA, we've started up this initiative. We hired an outreach coordinator in September of last year, and her sole focus is on reaching out to the American Farm Bureau, to other stakeholders who aren't specifically in the telecom industry but would have a substantial interest in what happens if broadband goes away or becomes unaffordable in their serving areas. So having that kind of message too, and we've been working with the Independent Community Bankers Association, all these different groups to come in and emphasize, reinforce that the importance of broadband in their community and what it would mean if these proposals go through. That's certainly a huge help too.
And switching gears just slightly, but maybe not that much in one sense, because before we always had a very robust national infrastructure where you make a call, you expect it to go through, you expect it to work. You mentioned something today, you called it epidemic, whether it is or not, I guess we'll find out, but this whole issue of call termination.
Yeah, so this came up, it popped up on providers' radar screens, I think, early last year, 2010. It bubbled up to the point where it became pervasive enough that it got on other radar screens later in the year last year. And so we spent a lot of time the last several months collecting data and talking with members about the different problems that are occurring. But yeah, I mean, there are a number of cases in which either calls aren't completing at all, or it rings 10 times on the caller's end, but only rings at the one time at the receiving end, so they don't even know the call's coming in, and the caller gives up. There are any number of different permutations of this. They can't tell who's calling in. The caller ID shows the wrong caller. So there are any number of permutations of this, and the problem is that it's essentially hiving off a lot of rural America because they're unable to receive calls. We've heard stories from members where police departments can't receive long-distance calls.
That's serious business.
Exactly. It has public safety impact, the consumer impact. One of the stories we heard was in South Dakota, a school alert system that lets parents know when there are blizzards going on. It can't place calls to those houses because of this problem. So, we did a study with NECA and a few other associations where I think we had over 200 companies respond, and 80% of them had this problem.
Wow.
And so I think epidemic probably is the right word in a lot of respects, especially when you consider that we're only scratching the tip of the iceberg in terms of how many people actually complain about this and make the issue.
Yeah, how many people think it's just bad cell coverage or something.
Exactly. So it really has become a significant concern. We've had some initial conversations with the FCC about it. They seemed to grasp the scope of it. How to deal with it is going to be a more complicated question because the way that the networks are interconnected at this point, you've got calls being handed off several times over before they reach what should be the ultimate destination. So there's a lot of unpacking and peeling the onion still to do here, but I think we're hopeful that there's progress being made and attention being paid to it now.
Well, Mike, it looks like there's going to be a lot of stuff for everyone to pay attention to in the next 6 months, particularly with these deadlines. So appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks. Take care.